And a good morning and happy New Year to you. I'm just hoping everything works right today. I had to, while we were away last week, I had to replace the hard drive in this computer. It does all our video stuff. I'd replaced the computer, kept the hard drive because I didn't have to reload everything. It took a big dump on me last week, and I said, screw this, I'm not going to try to fix it. So I just reloaded. Yeah. Everything seems to be working much, much better. So,
well, I'm glad. I'm glad it's working good. I hate that happened. But
well, I'd rather happen and get it fixed and move on and kind of go from there. So how was your holiday?
Fantastic. Very, very, very nice holiday. Great time with family and even a few friends. Got to see some posts and say hey to everybody. And, hey, man.
Some time up in the mountains?
Yeah, it was very interesting. G and I went up there. Stephen Hensley calls it New Year's Adam. Missed the day before New Year's Eve, right?
Right.
And they were talking about maybe get a little bit of snow. We got some. And then Mandy and I left. The kids came up for for a couple of days, and then Mandy and I left, Friday morning, about a little bit before lunchtime, and the next winter storm had already started moving in. So I woke up and it was beautiful, sunny, cold, about 33. When we left at 10 o'clock, it was starting to snow pretty hard and about 28. And they had about 5 inches at our house, and they had about 2 in Newland, and then they had some more over the weekend, with all that thing came through. I think they had like 6 or 7 at the house and about 5 in town, and supposed to get some more like maybe we are.
Mm-hmm. About 3 inches is what they're saying. Mm-hmm.
It's the typical southern snowstorm.
1,075 days since we've had a trace.
Of snow.
You got to have a tent to get a trace, is what they said this morning. We had that little dusting a couple weeks ago, just a little something on the ground, but it wasn't enough to do anything.
Wow.
But you're right. This is cold weather coming down. Yeah. You got the moisture coming up, and in typical fashion, the further out the moisture is to the east toward the ocean, the more we're going to get hammered with snow. So
it's back on us.
But just a couple of inches starting late Friday afternoon into Friday night, being over by Saturday morning. That's the kind of snow you want. Just an overnight going into a weekend, not really mess up anything. And it's been cold enough there'll be some lay on the ground.
Yeah, well, it'll be nice to see and have and all that, and it'll be like you said, it'll be out of here, but it's like a few more cold days ahead. So,
and it's early. We don't normally get our snows in January here. Right. We're more of a February March.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The year I was born was the 3 Wednesday snows.
Yeah, Mom and Dad talk about
3 Wednesdays that it snowed. The first 3 Wednesdays in March.
It snowed every Wednesday the whole year. I remember Mom and Dad talking about that. They were in high school. They said, we didn't go to school for like 3 weeks because it snowed on Wednesday. As soon as it would clear up, Monday, Tuesday, they got everything ready. It snowed again on that Wednesday.
And it came back again.
I was talking to a boy in Avery County, Tim Phillips. He's a county commissioner up there, and I coached his boy Samuel in baseball up there, whenever I was up there 25, 30 years ago. And Tim was telling me that, that those Wednesdays, like you're talking about, snowstorms, he was a lot younger. But he said that they were out of school for almost 8 weeks up there.
I can remember growing up.
He said it was crazy.
When I was in high school and stuff, and even in college, I can remember Watauga and Avery County missing months.
Oh, yeah.
Because you couldn't get around. I mean, you got more snow, and you didn't have the kind of capabilities that you've got now. And, of course, I say this, Brian, good morning. Joan, good morning. Randall, good morning. Dave Lilly, good morning. Yeah, David said really bad golf weather, especially since they changed the greens at Catawba. Yeah, that's a definite.
Yeah, tough day for golf.
Yes, it is.
Tough week or two, right?
Fat man's got to have 45 to 50 and rising for him to go out there and play golf. It's just not going to happen. Yeah. All in all, I was okay with football, with playoffs, with the college football playoffs. I think the 4 teams that are in it now, I don't think there's anybody that was left out that could beat one of those 4 teams. 4 teams that's in it now pretty good. Notre Dame, Penn State, Ohio State, and Texas.
Yep.
Now there's some tweaking that needs to be done.
Yes.
It's better than it was, but it's not fixed yet. They got to do better. They got to come up with a different thing with the seeding thing. And I'm kind of like, let's get our 10, 12, 14, 16, however many teams, and let's get our playoff. We got our playoff feel. And then we reseed. I don't care what you did in the conference. Right. Let's reseed based on let's look at all the analytics and the numbers and reseed and go from there, because that's where they kind of messed up. Because one of the things was who did Ohio State beat in the semis or in the quarters? Anyway, there should have been there's I like the home game thing. Yeah. I like the on-campus thing.
Yeah, I do too.
I'd like to see that till you get to the Final Four. I think that generated a lot of interest. I mean, seeing college football on college campuses that had that kind of impact. Yeah. And then the other thing that I would like to see, and Josh Stewart, good morning. The other thing that I would like to see, and they've talked about it a little bit, I think bowls themselves have played themselves out. Mm-hmm. However, let's keep them, but let's put them on the front end. Let's put marquee games at the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
Like they do the Chick-fil-A kickoff.
Right. Which is a big deal.
Let's do more of that and keep some of those, because if you don't, you're not going to have any interest. Yeah. And it's the only way that you can ensure that your top players are going to play. Yeah. Because they're going to opt out if it's a non-meaningful bowl.
Yeah, and I think there's some – you're right, under the current way things are.
Right.
But I think we've got some major, and I don't say minor, I say major tweaks coming all around. I think what's been discovered is the portal, there's a lot of benefits to that, but there's also a lot of downfall of the way that it is unmanaged.
And the timing of it. It's not
free-for-all.
The logistics is not right.
Yeah, and I think what you will see is everything ebbs and flows, and there's a yin and yang, and balance eventually comes back in before unbalance begins again.
Sure.
Right? So, from outside forces, the scale is normally, pretty level, and then outside forces come in or new ideas and disrupt. And that's not ever a bad thing, because things work themselves out. But I really think that, that they've got to do a better job of getting the last four teams right in the football playoff. I don't think, the first 7 or 8. I didn't like Boise State. I had issues with them. I didn't feel like that you could say SMU should be in, but Army's out. I'm a big fan of a lot of these teams, a lot of these coaches, but the argument can be made that why certain teams got in, and it's because they won the championship. Well, if the last game doesn't matter, then how did Clemson get in?
Well, and the other side of it,
I'm glad they did, but how did they get in?
The other thing that you've got to take into consideration, and this, Andrew, good morning. This is where I have my problem and why I want to see those bowl games flip to the front end. Mm-hmm. It is because the first thing I'd like to see, if you move the bowl games to the front end, get rid of conference championships.
Yeah.
You don't need – and the reason I say that is because we do not have conferences that matter when you got 18 teams.
Yeah.
They don't matter because you don't have anything that you can go from to determine that I really got a conference champion. SMU, Miami, and Clemson in the regular season didn't play each other.
Right. I think that's a big deal too. And one of the arguments that, is made when you're looking at things, they say, well, the seeds are kind of laid out where they are to seed. The teams are kind of laid out. So this last week that we're playing these conference championship games, these are pretty much set. Mm-hmm. Well, again, Clemson had to win the ACC championship even to get in. But, my question is this. When I look at the scheduling, how is it that a loss that is bad is not as good as a win that is really good?
Right.
And so for Ole Miss and Alabama's standpoint, they both beat Georgia, right, this year. Mm-hmm. And now all of this is arguable, but I'm saying I think these are things that have to be fixed. And to your point, how do the conference championships, work themselves out? Is it just a champion at the end of the season? I would like to throw out all the metrics other than win-losses, because then you get into apples and oranges, because then you have things like style points, or you have, how many points did you give up, where you may need to play kids, play players to discover who you have when you have a comfortable lead. I'm a big fan of that. Like if I have a comfortable lead or I'm way down, I want to play younger players or less experienced players that may be older to truly be able to evaluate them. Less and less of that goes on because of analytics. Well, our RPI is this.
But if we change the way the analytics work so that we don't take that into consideration, high school football does the same thing with RPI.
Right.
You know,
and I don't think that's right. I think that you have a team that goes in and plays maybe a team that's down, like West Caldwell is a good example. You know, and the starters stay in all the way through the third quarter, and you rack up 60 points. You know, there's no need to do that when the score, you know, is 60 to, 10 or 60 to 7 or whatever it is. You know, that's a time for you to be able to, fairly evaluate, the younger players or less experienced players that need that valuation and feedback, where instead you have to worry about, well, if I give up too many points, then it's going to go – I'm just giving an example. I'm not saying it's doing that or not doing that, but there's so many metrics that, that people like to point to, but it's all apples and oranges because there may be injuries. Certain players may not play. I think, Laney, it's just as bad. Like you said, I believe it was Clemson, SMU, and
Miami.
And Miami didn't play each other. I think it's just as bad if they do, and two or three of the key players are out, because then analytics are then trying to be pushed in that for when those players did play. So there's a lot of dynamics at work here, and the bottom line is you manage the game to try to be successful and win the game at the end, not to win by X amount of points or look at my offensive prowess or genius. And that we've kind of gotten away from the true construct of, what it means to line up and play football.
Right.
And we're trying to throw in things that can make good arguable points but are not really valid. And so my point is, again, when the committee's looking at things, and again, committee, it's not good. The only way to fix this is to have conference champions, have different conferences, have a champion.
Well, you go back like we said.
Don't have any at large.
You don't have conferences. You just have 8 divisions and let those 8 play.
Right.
And because those 8 would play each other.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
That's
you
right.
would know.
It's measurable.
Right.
So if you have, and this is a great example, and I think Andrew and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago. I think if you look at it and you have like the SEC West, and they are one conference. Yes, there's going to be 2 or 3 teams. If you have a 16-team playoff, they're going to be left out. But they know that going in. LSU could have beat anybody at any time, but yet they could have lost to anybody at any time. It's these metrics. Yep. That's why the only way to do it right, like you were talking about, is have conference champions. I don't like committee.
Yeah, no, I don't like the
But if they're
going
to do that, they need to do a better job of getting it right.
I messed up. I was screwing my phone and I wiped out Andrew's comment, but his comment was something to the effect that he doesn't like the committee. However, when they took the teams that made the playoffs, they had requirements and they had a way that it was set up. This is who gets in. It wasn't right, and we found that out this year, like with Boise. It wasn't right, but they had a formula, and they stuck to it, and now tweak the formula.
Well, I think Andrew made a good point like a month or so ago when we're all on that group chat, we're going through, and he said, I think the committee got it right. And before I was like, what have you been smoking over there, on water plant? Okay, what kind of plant on water? But what he was saying was, and he came back to it and said, based on the criteria that they put out. And he's right, based on that criteria.
Yep.
The problem is that, you say, well, these conference champions go here, but then we're going to move these other teams in, based on what we see. And I just don't feel like that, in full disclosure, I'm an East Carolina guy. We finished the year great and strong. It was wonderful, da-da-da-da-da, that's my team. But when I look at these things, I don't know how an argument for a bad loss is more important than arguments for big wins. Because that shows the true potential. It doesn't show the true decline, because any
That's
day
always
can be
been
a
a
bad
contention
day.
point. Which is more important, a great win or a bad loss?
Well, I think it tells you a lot about your team. I think both do. And I think Lane Kiffin had a great argument. If you think about it, Alabama and Ole Miss both beat South Carolina, who beat Clemson at Clemson. Clemson wins AC championship. Now, again, Andrew's right, or, our whole group chat. The committee, under the guidelines, got it right. But the problem is, how do you pick certain teams to go in? Like, in Arizona State, who has 2 really bad losses at the beginning of the year, but nobody seemed to care about those because they went on a 9 straight winning streak. It's like,
well, that's one of the things that, because of the expanded playoffs, and this is something I heard Cowherd say that I hadn't thought about that is exactly right. Now this year in the NFL, I don't think we have a team in the playoffs without double-digit wins, which is not usually the case. Everybody's got at least 10 or more.
6 or 7 some years in the South.
I mean, it's been ugly.
But it's been a little better.
It's been ugly.
Yeah, it's been a little better.
So the point he was making was now with college football, with the playoffs that they have and the expanded playoff field, an early season loss doesn't kill you like it used to. Yeah. Even a late season loss may not, depending upon who it is and what the situation is. And that's what the NFL has done. The NFL, you play all the way through the season, and you don't really get to know where you're going till you get to the end of the season. So that means that every week means something. Now, week 18 doesn't mean something to certain teams.
And because you earned it, basically, 1 through 16 or 17, and I understand that. That's okay.
And I want to see, and this was something else that I've heard the talking heads talk about. College football championship needs to be over before the NFL playoffs start. They don't need to compete. College football championship, I'd like to see January 1st or 2nd or something around
the
then.
holiday weekend will be done.
I'm not, and I don't want to see buys because you already got 2 weeks. If you don't have a buy, if you do have a buy, you got 3 weeks. I think that hurts some teams because you get rusty. I've told you, I do not like
Oregon.
Open. You're exactly right.
Killed Oregon.
They set for 3 weeks. I don't want to see. I don't want to see teams set.
Yeah.
And I want everybody to be on the same kind of schedule. I'm a little confused. Like this week, let's see, tomorrow night's the first game. Mm-hmm. There's one tomorrow night and there's one Friday night. I believe that's right because then they don't compete with the playoffs. I think there's a game tomorrow and a game Friday.
Yeah, is it 9 and 10? And today's the 8th.
Does that
sound right?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So
that's right.
they're gonna get that worked
I got it
out.
right here. Let me look.
But I don't like all the time spent. And the other comment that I heard is if you can't figure out how to do this with FBS, call up the folks at over on the FCS side.
So
on the 1AA side,
you're right.
Just call them up because they've been doing this crap for years and it works.
So it's interesting that you bring that up. Robbie brought that up.
Division 2 and 3 do the same thing,
right? And then AIA and junior college, how they do. And it's interesting. So I started kind of messing around with this and looking into some things and talking and shooting some emails out and text message guys that are in the Division 1 arena and are on campuses and understand the dynamics of things. And what's happening is what everybody talks about. From my understanding and from the information I've gathered, it's just basically for TV and revenue.
Well, it's because ESPN owns the playoffs.
And when it all comes down to it, that is truly why we have an extended playoff version. Because the longer you keep people engaged, the more advertisement, the more weeks that go by. College football playoff, here it comes. We're brought to you by. I'm just giving an example like Home Depot. When they would do that on College Game Day. And,
that's why they need to move those bowl games to the front end,
right? So
that they've got some relevance. Because, and there's 2 or might be 3 of them. The one that always comes to mind is the Chick-fil-A Bowl they do in Atlanta. But there's a couple of them in the early season, and I like that. Let's start football then, and let's don't make it. I can't remember. If somebody goes all the way, they could play 17 games.
Yeah,
that's way too many in college.
Yeah, it's a lot, and it potentially. I need this. I call it fact checked. I need just checked on. But I think if Hawaii is involved, it may be 18. I think where you get an extra one if you travel there or do what I'm saying, or Alaska, whatever. I need to verify that, but I think that's right. So to your point. A lot of things can be upgraded. This year I was more engaged because I felt like there was more at stake.
Yes.
In most cases, Laney, in today's world and probably throughout history, less is more. But I think what they had to do
quality, not quantity.
Right. I think what they had to do is expand so they increased the quality so they could condense it down and even increase the quality even more. So I think sometimes – it's kind of like the expansion theory and the Big Bang and all this and whatever. But these things naturally happen. We talked about it before at the beginning of the show, ebbing and flowing and yin and yang and all that. And I think we have a lot of disruptors in college football. I think we're going to have a couple in NFL football that are going to be coming back in with Gruden. I think Gruden's going to be a head coach by the end of by March, maybe sooner. I think he's back. I think he may end up in Chicago. From what I understand, G was telling me yesterday that he was on this whatever he gets on, getting all this stuff, but the sources are pretty reliable, and he was telling me about Gruden and Caleb Williams, being in contact quite a bit. So, right. and from what I understand, I was talking to a buddy of mine yesterday, and again, I'll talk to him again today, that lives up just outside of Boston. Most people feel like Vrabel, and that's a Captain Obvious thing, but they really feel like he's he understands the Patriot way. And it's not the Belichick way. It's kind of what Kraft allowed Belichick to construct and then put in place so the fan base and I'll tell you something about Gerard Mayo. I really feel like he's probably potentially one of the greatest coaches, or has an opportunity to be one of the best that we may see. He because of his playing experience, because of his character. I think Bob Kraft was right in his statement and what he said about I just hired him too soon. Bob Kraft basically puts it on himself and says, "Look, this is my fault." He's like, he was in waiting.
But that don't make it good or right.
Right, and I think what it does acknowledge is that you know what, just because somebody's young doesn't necessarily mean that opportunity needs to be given right away. That maybe some more experience and some of those rough edges being filed down a little bit along the way.
The stuff that I read was he tried to do it like Belichick, but he ain't Belichick.
Well,
you can't. I mean, I understand where he came from and how he came through, but that doesn't mean that you've got certain coaches that you're going to get certain responses from players because of who you are.
Right.
And if another coach comes in just because they were on that staff and they do it like he did, that doesn't mean that those players are going to respect that same thing. There's a difference there.
Well, I think, guy that's our neighbor, Brian Brown.
Yeah.
When Coach Brown, Tom Brown, decided to retire and Brian came in, Brian, he and I talked about this a lot. He has his own, style, coaching style.
Absolutely.
And, he say, look, my dad does it one way, I do it another. And, I think that, good for him for doing his thing and recognizing the way he does it. And, in my case, personally and professionally, being able to learn from both of those. I sat beside Brian for 3 or 4 years, on Fridays and in film rooms and, learned a lot of perspective about things and, things to look at. And, of course, and this, having coached against Tom and, knowing, sitting in there with Tom and Fred and watching, video on Sunday evening, there's a lot to be learned. And so –
but you still have to develop your own. You just use those things that you've learned to build who you are.
Yeah, and Coach Brown, Tom Brown, he was I talked to him very early on in my career. Said, Coach Brown, I love being a baseball coach. I'm so excited about the opportunity here at Maiden, when I first got and everything. I said, but, I really want to be a head football coach one day. And he said, son, if that's what you want to do, you keep grinding, you keep working. There's going to be there's a lot of rough times and things that you have to adapt to. He said, I got a job here when I was very young, had some trials and tribulations that I do even now. He said, but, you give yourself time and try not to be too impatient while being –
that's right.
While being a go-getter. And it was just really good advice, and I think that, that was something that as I was, interviewing for a few football jobs in the mountains and I was in my late 20s, early 30s, whatever, and got a couple of jobs up there, football-wise, that I kept that in mind and used that. And I think in Gerard Mayo's case, he's going to continue. Like, he's going to be a defensive coordinator somewhere.
Oh, he's not going to be without a job.
He's going to be an assistant head coach. And I'm not so sure he may not end up back in New England in 3 or 4 years. I don't think he was rubbed the wrong way. I think that it was just very apparent that the time is not now.
Right.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
You keep developing.
Yeah.
And, I just feel – and you've made good points about that with other coaches too, even off the air when we've talked about things about how a lot of guys are really good assistants, but maybe
not always a
better head coach or have that pedigree. But that doesn't make them wrong or bad. It makes them really good at the role that they have and the value they bring. And I like these young coaches. I like these young players in the NFL. I really like where the league's going. I want college football to get cleaned up. And with the disruptors coming in, with Belichick coming to UNC, Chapel Hill. He's not. That's a disruption. And I don't mean in a bad way, but I just
can't find anybody that really shares that he's going to set the house on fire. No, I just can't find any of the analysts. Will Bennett, good morning. Brett, good morning. Suzanne, Mike, Sherry, Keista, Milton, good morning to all you guys. Who's the best coach not on the sideline in the NFL right now?
Nick Saban.
I'm not sure he's an NFL coach.
Saban? Oh, yeah.
I like promoting Nick Saban to
for college football, right? Yeah, no, I understand that.
Bizarre.
I understand. So let's take him out of the equation. Okay. So let's just say that it's John Gruden.
Okay.
I think that's fair.
You put Gruden over Vrabel?
Yes, 100%, and 10 times on Sunday. But I'm not discounting Vrabel. I'm talking about that's how good I think Gruden is. He's a Super Bowl champion coach. He has a way of doing things. It's kind of like Sean Payton. There's a reason that Bo Nix is accelerating.
Yes.
And it's not because he's lucky or it's his first year. Bo Nix has been married for 3 or 4 years. He Auburn and then to Oregon, and he has been through the ringer. As far as being a starter, being benched, coming back and being a great player. And when some quarterbacks are worried about their style and the nightlife and what color their fingernails are and things like this. To me, he always seems like he's focused on how can I get better and close that gap every day between where I am and trying to achieve greatness for my team. It's kind of like we saw the gap close with Roethlisberger, each week. Aaron Rodgers in his early part of his career, as he went on, and Dan Marino. I just feel like Bo Nix and Justin Herbert, are the two that. And Gruden can communicate this and get his people in that can take his style, because he doesn't care how much money you make. He cares about you doing your job. And I think that's what the younger players are begging for, because everybody's cared about what they can do instead of, who they are. And I think Gruden brings both of those into play.
I agree. Yeah. And I think Gruden, like Vrabel, is a culture builder.
Yeah.
Another one Milton said here on the sidelines, I agree. Ron Rivera will be back on the sideline. He's another one that's a culture builder.
He's a great
You
man.
go in, wow. I mean, but his
that's
problem at Washington is because he had a dumpster fire.
And he still did well with it.
He had come in with the ownership that's there now. He would probably do as well as Washington's doing now. I think.
Yeah, it's fun.
And the other thing, you talk about Sean Payton and Bo Nix. When you look at that marriage of quarterback and coach, I don't think there's a better example than right here in Charlotte at the Panthers.
Oh, this developing each.
Oh, my gosh.
And I think it's been behind the scenes.
What he's been able to do, because here's the deal.
Yeah, that's a good.
You threw a kid in there that wasn't ready, just like they did with David Carr, destroyed him. Yeah, and Andrew Luck, that's another one. Think about if he'd have been on a decent team, what it would have been.
And
so
been healthy and
when I look at it, and then yesterday I looked at the first release that somebody put up of a mock draft. I think the Panthers are 7. Taking a top receiver. Exactly. You got to build around this kid.
I think so. What Bryce has shown, though, and there's been a lot of criticism, and that's okay. It rightfully so. You have to perform, or you're a dumpster fire.
Yep.
You have to. It's the NFL. But I think the one thing, and we talked about this before the season started, and I told you that I was talking to somebody down, and I'm trying to think who it was, in training camp. And they said that Canales was really making headway with Young.
Yeah.
And, of course, the season started and things didn't look so good. But I think what he was talking about was, as a maturity part of it, Bryce is already a real fast, high-impact, very quick thinker on his feet and can assess a lot of information. The issue is that if you're when you're 1-on-1 or even 1-on-2, you can still do some things and process things in front of you. But there's 3 and 4 people coming at you at one time. Then all that information you can process doesn't matter because you're on your back or dead or whatever, right? And things evolved as the season went on, and he had a chance to sit back and reflect. And sometimes taking that step back is what allows you to get 2 steps forward. And I think one thing that has not been preached enough, and because patience is involved, is reflection. I remember a couple of years ago, you were on the sidelines with us, and one of the players, who was one of our better players at Maiden, was not having a good night. And, I just took him out.
Yeah.
And you were like, what? And you knew he wasn't playing well at the time. And I didn't fuss everything. I said, you need to sit over here and watch for a series. Get refocused so we can get you back in. And he's one of our better players.
Right.
And, the other coaches were like, why is he out? I'm like, hold it, guys. Okay. Hey.
Yeah.
And we're good. And it allowed him to, settle down some. And I think that's what Bryce was able to do for, whatever it was, 2, 3, 4 games, and then work his way back in. So that's exciting. The games are a lot of fun. I will tell you, I enjoyed – Wayne gave me and Garrick some tickets to go watch the Bucks and Panthers a few weeks ago, and that was wonderful. And we had a good experience, but the fan experience was good. And there's a lot of excitement. Even though they lost in overtime and thought they were going to win, the fan base is still juiced about things, and I think they're excited.
What does it say to you about how many times the Panthers didn't quit and took somebody to overtime? I mean, to me, didn't always come out on top, but I guess the biggest thing that I saw through them, even though there was nothing to play for, that was a playoff game for them.
Yes.
And
I think some of the guys, Lenny, were playing for jobs and playing for status. Well, I mean status. I'm not talking about stat. I'm talking about
to be traded or whatever.
To try to find a good fit and know that they were and maybe they hadn't played as well as they wanted to, or maybe weren't as focused as they needed to be. But I like the direction they're going. I think things have made a 180. I was not real happy with ownership.
Well, ownership stayed out of the way this year. That's why
I haven't heard a lot about that. I've heard about the Panthers and not the owner. And I think, successful franchises long term, and I'm talking about wins on the field and championships, tend to lean that way. You don't hear you don't see the Rooney family at any or you didn't, 15 years ago.
Or the Kraft family.
But you knew who they were, but they didn't have to be around. And that's kind of important too.
There has been one statement that came out from Tepper this week, and the only thing that he said was, I think we found our franchise quarterback. I think he's right.
Yeah.
And if he can just stay out of the way. Junior, good morning. Andrew said, and I'm going to argue with this one, Andrew, the founder CEO of Nike just set it on fire, pledging unlimited NIL funds to Oregon. That becomes almost as much as a difference maker as a coach. Let me tell you why that doesn't work. For the simple reason there's not enough – I don't want to use restrictions, but there's not enough rules with that money that goes along with it.
Yeah.
Because they're jumping at the first thing that happens. And the top payroll in Major League Baseball – doesn't always win championships. So it's not always about that. Because the other thing you have, I think, one of the things that you started having when you threw all this money in there, you got a lot of egos with kids that can't handle it, and then they don't perform and they don't live up to the hype that they've done, but they got the money.
Yeah, and I think a good example of where NIL money has come in is maybe somebody like in Ohio State.
Andrew mentioned that. Yep.
Oh, well, sorry.
No.
And I think they're a good example. I think we can go back to the traditionals. The Georgias, the Alabamas. Even Ole Miss. I'm not discounting Ole Miss going forward. Lane Kiffin is a different bird, but the fact of the matter is he is very, very good at what he does, and even as offensively, as much prowess as he has and the things that he likes to do. He normally has a very good defense and great defensive players. If
you could make one change to the way the NIL thing works right now, one change, what guideline would you like to see instituted today?
If you sign, it has to be for multiple years. It has to be for the term of your contract. If not, you have to give them. I say give the money back. You've got to pay the university plus a fine for a penalty for leaving early.
If it's truly NIL, that money should travel with you because they're buying you. They're putting monny on you, not you at Oregon, not you at Texas.
But
you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Right? I never wanted to see NIL become recruiting money, and even though that's not what it's supposed to be,
that's all it is.
That's what's happening, and I don't like that. I don't like that.
We have probably, arguably the best football coach that's ever lived, or one of the top that's not coached anymore because his wife comes up to him and says, "Why are we doing this?"
Right.
All they're not worried about us developing and taking care of their young men that they're sending to us. All they care about is, well, how much money are we getting?
I'll go back to the high school kid out of
it's a value-based system.
Out of Greensboro that was suing because he had a trading card company that offered him $1 million. Here's the deal. That $1 million was going to go with him wherever he went to play because they were investing in him as a future. It's kind of like if you've got a high school star that does great, if you get that autograph, well, when he becomes an NFL star, you've really got something. You know what I'm saying? And so I want to see it. If it were me in NIL, my first thing would be I'm putting a cap on it. Every team can spend up to $20 million, the salary cap if you want to call it, $20 million. If you break that, you get the death penalty.
Well, the problem with that is, and I think you're right, there needs to be rules and restrictions, but the problem with that is now you're going the same thing back to scholarships. So it's not about the amount of money. It's about the amount of what's offered and then what you do within what you have.
Correct.
And then it creates, again, the same scenario that we've seen a long, long time. And the other thing with NIL, what we've all noticed is, and you made a good point about this, is that the money doesn't travel with the player. What happens is a university has sponsors that come in and give everybody a new truck to drive for the season.
I think it was Colorado State, if I'm not mistaken.
And you know what I mean.
So,
So, that it's university-based and not player-based. And it's about getting the best player there. And there's a lot more to things than just the player. And the flash of it's great. It's like the first-round draft pick. Everybody's all excited, or they're just devastated. Like when Josh Allen got picked first by the Bills, their fans just lost their minds. Like, oh, no, what are we doing? And, I don't know, man. So, Lanny, I just feel like that things are still out of kilter. That
I
there
agree.
is a level of attainment and achievement that you must pass through in order to reach full maturity and adulthood, like the formal stages of.
That's why you have to have rules and guidelines.
But what have we been? We've been incredibly less rules based and almost to the point lawless.
Yes.
In many different areas of society alone that we've seen or witnessed, for many years now. And again, things ebb and flow. And I'm not being critical. I'm making an observation. So, it's one of those things that where does the pendulum swing back and how far?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
in this case, it swung pretty far to one side. There's a lot of momentum that will come back to the other side, and for regulatory, as far as what is allowed to do at the age you're allowed to do it, things. Age is a matter of mind. If you don't mind, it don't matter, right?
Yeah.
That's what the elderly kind of statement is, a little refrigerator tag. But what has to happen is, I don't care how young or old you are, Doogie Howser, MD, was a great show and was a lot of fun to watch. Was kid, he's a doctor. Listen, that's great, but that's not real.
Right.
The fantasy fairyland stuff, all this, it's got to, things have to go in, they got to go in order.
But it's new.
And you can't skip it. Yeah, it's a shiny object.
It's new, and it came out without any type of guidelines.
Right.
It's like giving a kid, turning a kid loose in an old Toys R Us and say, go get what you want, and there's no cap. It's the same thing.
Yeah, fill your buggy up.
You can't do that.
All you get in your buggy.
You can't do that.
Yeah,
Matt
right.
Hendricks, good morning. Judy,
You're
good
right.
morning. Thanks for joining us. I appreciate you tuning in, and a happy day late birthday. I think yesterday was your birthday, Judy. Judy was my neighbor I grew up with. Andrew said salary cap instantly and must play all games the team plays. I've heard another thing suggested out there when it comes to NIL, and I don't remember who said you get money every game that you play, but you hold back a substantial portion of that if you don't complete the season, you don't get the rest of the money.
So how do you do like severe injuries, or if you're playing a team?
It's kind of like here's the thing.
If you're playing a team that maybe is not as good, that week, and you can rest an extra week, how do you handle?
Well,
those
I'm okay
things?
with that. I'm okay with that.
But see, that's the thing though. How is that
coach's
measurable?
decision?
Well, then I read a thing, and I think you got it too, where a coach got sued.
Yes.
For NIL. He promised me this, and I didn't get this, and that's what we talked about. Coaches are on the hot seat for this stuff. They want to coach. They don't get to.
Yeah.
They basically got to be brokers.
Well, I've told you this, and this is Mike Probst. Good morning.
Broker.
I'm going to tell you
Dabo's
this.
not a broker.
Because here's what's going to happen, and you don't like it when I say this, but I think it's one of the few ways that you fix it is you almost have to unionize to get control. Just like the NFL, just like the NBA, just like Major League Baseball. I don't like it, but I don't know. Right now, I don't know how you fix it.
Well, you go back and you set a set of rules and criteria, and if they don't want to play by it, then they go somewhere else. That's what you do. I mean, it's like going in. I was talking to a boy that coaches at over at Bunker Hill, and I was talking to him last night about my first year over at Maiden trying to do baseball. I got 3 kids that show up in jeans for practice.
Mm-hmm.
You have to set standards. You got to set an expectation, and they have to abide by it, or they can't play.
Mm-hmm.
You go out there and say, "Look, guys, this is what we're doing.
The
this
problem
is what we're charging."
is
you got 6 seniors just leave
because
they want to do it their way.
You gotta have a commitment from the organization that we're going to do this. This is how we're going to do it. And there may be some fallout when I institute this until you get it. I love watching some of these movies, and I don't know the names of them because I just see snippets of them if it's on Facebook Reels or it's on TikTok. But you see a coach come in, and you've got the superstar that wants to do, I'm running this. I go back to the movie The Replacements when the quarterback broke the picket line and came in and told Gene Hackman, you don't call the plays. I call the plays when I'm on the field. You got to have an organization that will back you on that are saying, okay, we're going to take some on the chin for a year or two, but then we're going to get things straightened out where everybody's on the same page. Andrew brings a good comment when he says, bigger problem is we try to fix it without integrity and character of folks not being a factor, and that's really tough to do.
No, he's right.
You can't. And then when you bring in these guidelines and restrictions and requirements and all that type of stuff, got to be able to stick to them. And you don't bend it for this kid because he's a great kid.
That's the difference between a principle-based program and a values-based program.
Right.
Principles are based on truths and absolutes. These are things that are expected. This is what you are going to do. This is what you're not going to do, and this is what we demand you do.
But principles equate to value with time.
Yeah,
you can get the value.
Right.
But value is instant gratification.
That's
Principles,
exactly right.
You lay a foundation of culture, the whole thing.
And what happens is, as you are principally based, your values become incredibly stronger, from a moral sense of what is right.
Yeah.
And so then, if it's principle based and value oriented, then you have the best of both worlds.
That's right.
I thought Bob Wansker, he just texted me. He's driving.
He was watching,
going down to, I believe, Florence today to see some clients. But he was telling me or asking me, he said, do these players ever go to class? And I answered, yes, most of them do. They are there for degrees. Now, some are there to go to the NFL, and they still participate in some of the things. But what we've gotten to is we want all the privileges of a multimillionaire and lifestyle of an adult
without the responsibility,
with all the protections of a child, and unfortunately that does not work.
Right.
Ask the young lady that is the global warming specialist how protections work if you're going to go out on stage and promote certain things or ideas. Right. It's the same thing with players going out and doing that. You can't have both sides of it, and when you try to do that and you do have it temporarily, then things become chaotic and you actually lose both ends, and it becomes unstable. So
before let me scroll down here. before we get out of here, let me get your picks. And for those that are listening, we will see you on Wednesdays moving forward, trying to get schedules, and I'm trying to get control of my schedule again. Tatum, good morning. Milton said, setting rules now is like putting a stopper in after the bathtub's empty.
Yeah.
And that's exactly right.
Point. That's
We're just putting the genie back in the bottle. Mike said, let the kids go get their own NIL money from a sponsor. The school has nothing to do with it. That way the kid gets paid for a job basically regardless of the school they go to. That's what I've been saying all along. If your NIL is supposed to be for your recognition as a player, has nothing to do with you as a school, and we've twisted it and used it as a recruiting tool. So I think that's got to
But this hand's here.
I know.
Right. Look at this. Shiny object. And then this is what's really happening.
I know.
And, I think what you're saying is valid, and that is a idealistic point of view. The problem is, in discussions we've had today and earlier, on and off the air, you just got to find a way to, make it right. And while nothing's perfect, it can be a whole lot better.
Yeah. And as long as we keep working at it, I'm okay with that.
And telling people no.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to do this. This is my value. Well, your value is only what somebody's willing to pay, and I'm sorry, I'm not willing to pay that.
That's
you can
correct.
go to somebody else that is. I am not.
That's correct.
That's why, when I'm looking at these kids and players getting drafted, I don't want the flashy green shiny. I mean, that's why Bassmasters throw the shiny spinner out there.
Mm-hmm.
They don't put the little worm on the hook that's real.
Mm-hmm.
They put the shiner out there because they want the quick one, right? They want the big one, right? If you consistently, fish over time, you're going to use more traditional bait. You're going to, have a better stand longer of what you're trying to do. And
it's about what you guys the total.
Yeah.
Two matchups coming. Give me what you think. Notre Dame and Penn State.
I think the game's going to be a little closer than we think.
Notre Dame's given 1.5.
Yeah, I think Notre Dame's going to win this. I like the way that I like their offensive line, Laney. Their defense is good. Actually, it's real good. Penn State, I feel like, is one of those that I guess they're okay, but I'm just not really convinced.
Mm-hmm.
Notre Dame, I like them, but they did have the one falter earlier in the year with losing to, was it Northern Illinois?
I think that's right.
Yeah, that will hang in the back of their minds, and I think their goal is to make sure nothing like that ever happens again, especially this team. So playing for that could have actually made them better. I would say they're probably 6 to 10 points.
What is interesting is the Final Four are the 4 lowest seeds from the original seeding, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Notre Dame's a 7, Penn State's a 6, Ohio State's an 8, Texas is a 5. Ohio State is a 5.5-point favorite.
So all the teams that got buys are out.
Yes.
To your point.
But they followed the requirements, but the requirements were wrong.
Yeah.
That's the point. And that's what I'm going back and saying here. I don't think there's 4 teams. I don't think there's another team on the sideline that's better than these 4 teams that's in the finals.
Yeah, well, I don't know about Penn State. I mean, the first game they play SMU, who arguably would have I don't know about that, okay? And then Penn State plays Boise State, who – I mean, I don't know where. Yeah, again, they had a set of criteria. Great, they followed that part. They got their part right, but the thing was wrong.
How about Ohio State and Texas? Who do you like?
Right now, Ohio State, but Texas at any time could put 50 on them, even as good as their defense is, because their offense could be that good. It's just real anemic right now and not very high functioning. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Manning a little more in this game and in the national championship if they do make it. But it looks to be an Ohio State, Notre Dame matchup. It does.
What happened here? Okay. They don't like what I did. Let me try that again. I think you're right. But I think are these teams that you feel like will be Are these teams that are going to be perennials?
Yeah.
Has
Notre
Texas gotten fixed
Well,
with Sark?
yeah. They
Sark
got the right guy. Oh, yeah. They got the right guy in there. And there's always question about Ryan Day. There just is. There's always going to be question: is he the right guy? You can't win this game, but yet he's in the national semifinals. You can't do this, but yet he's here. I don't know. I like James Franklin at Penn State, but that's not national champ. I mean, they could play for it and they could win, I guess. But I just don't see that a year in, a year out thing there. I don't. I just don't see it. I see a guy that loves his players, that works as hard as anybody in the country, that promotes the welfare of college football and the college student athlete and tries to do things right. And I think he does. He came in an incredibly tough situation, having everything, with a couple of coaches in between him and, the things that left with Paterno and, all the issues there with that. But, he does a great job, and I'm a big fan of him. But, the landscape's getting ready to change.
I
College
agree.
football's taking a different direction. They've got older coaches that are coming in because, the new flashy, shiny object thing, it's like the NFL. It doesn't work. Yeah. I mean, I just think that time-tested, proven, and true is a better scenario.
I'm going to borrow your phrase. Young, shiny objects will work.
Yes.
As long as there's substance more than their style.
Correct.
The style may have gotten you there, but you better have substance to build on moving forward. And I think Dave Canales is going to be one of those.
Well, Cliff Kingsbury is going to be back in NFL
Yes,
as
he
head
will.
coach too.
I agree.
We failed to mention him. That was one that when I was saying Gruden, I think Gruden and Vrabel were up there at the top. But also I think Cliff Kingsbury took some time, reflect. You had a tough time with the Murray, Kyler Murray. Yeah. It was really tough down there. He got thrown into a situation where he got fired from a college job, was hired as an NFL head coach. He had a chance to make some mistakes, do some things right. He took time off to reflect, got completely out of the game, gave himself time to grow as a person and as a coach. Now I think you see 2.0 coming out and, a little bit of McVay tenacity that will be added to this.
I agree, and I think part of the thing that hurt him was I don't think Kyler Murray's who they thought he was. From an NFL standpoint.
Yeah, I think who he was promoted to be,
Yeah.
I don't think he ended up being that.
Right.
Because from everything that we read and hear, they pretty much know who he is.
Yes. Yep. So they're going to have to figure it out.
Yeah. I mean, when you're accused of wanting to play video games more than watch film, there's a problem. People can talk about, he's a great player. He plays hard when he plays and things like that. You don't rise to the occasion. You fall to the level of your training and your preparation, and then that's where you settle when times get tough or you need to compete for a championship. And I think having the mentality great players are make great plays and rise to the occasion. Well, that may be true and catchy. The previous of what I was talking about is very true.
Nothing
across the board.
Nothing is going to take the place of putting in the time in all areas that you need to in any sport or anything you do in life. If you don't put the time in, you can't get to the next level. You can't be successful with it. It won't let you override. I just don't think there's anything that replaces. I don't think talent and abilities and all these things replace the amount of time you put into whatever it is to developing what you do.
Yeah, and that's right. I think it's the time that's invested.
Yep.
All right, along with the, with the diligence and desire. All right, that the outcome works out in your favor, and when you can get a large group to do that. You get 80% of the production from 20% of the players. Yeah. It's the 80-20 rule. It's the same way in business. It's just a life thing, and that's okay. But what you try to do is improve those 20, the 80% that only give you 20 and try to get 25 to 30 out of them and allow your 20 to do the 80. Then you've got over 100. People say, you can only have 100%. Dude, you're not listening to what I'm saying.
Right.
That's the way that you rise.
Yeah.
Above everything, and you settle at the level of your training, which raises your ability to be successful because of the continuity across the board.
Nope.
I feel like that's the way my team at Maiden won the state championship. I felt like we had a couple of really good players, and then we had some very good high school players, and we had some younger guys that trained really hard that took I call it browbeating. I mean, just really hard coaching every day, and put the work in, the sweat equity, and invested their time and their focus. And when their number was called, they're the ones that stepped up, and they're the reason we won the thing.
That's
our great players are, the old saying, the great players are going to make great plays. Well, our great players worked as hard as our younger kids that were still developing. And I think that was the difference. That was kind of my culture thing was every day you had to compete for your job. I had 3 brothers on that team, but every day, Aaron had to go out and play shortstop and pitch better than everybody else. Grant had to catch better than everybody else. Stephen Lowe, if he was going to play, he had to do his outfield better than anybody else. He had to hit, and every day was a competition. There was nothing safe out there except that you were safe when you were with me, but your job was never safe because you had to work for it every day.
And that's what it should be.
And I think a lot of our high schools in this area, especially the ones baseball-wise that, local, we've had some really, really good baseball teams in this county. And we will, each year, have one or whatever. We've had very good coaching. But looking back on it, I felt like the level of expectation, in a lot of those scenarios was not really set at the highest level for the players' benefit. And I'm not faulting anybody for that. I'm saying that's just an observation. And, I had to learn from that and say, no matter what, this is the highest level we can go. This is what we're striving for. And everything underneath it, how do we close that gap? How do we demand this of these players? Their time, effort, and energy, but more importantly, do they have the desire and focus to go with that time, effort, and energy and building that kind of culture? And I see that in a lot of these younger players that are going, from high school to college and college to the NFL. I'm starting to see that cultural mindset where they're shifting away from really, the great players about how much money they're going to get, because that's going to be there regardless. It's about playing for championships. Where can I go to be successful?
Yeah. All right, guys, have a great day. Stay warm. Got some snow coming in for the weekend. Nothing happens out. I'll see you back briefly on Friday. Bill Bender should join me. The boys will be in here Saturday morning, weather provided. I don't know, weather permitting. We'll be back next Wednesday. In the meantime, have a good one. We'll see you then.
Oh, wait. Going to Auburn Monday, Tuesday, be back Wednesday, so maybe we can do Thursday, Friday next week.
That'll be fine.
Okay.
We'll get it worked out. Have a good day, everybody.